You're listening to unDUBBED, the podcast that strips the jargon and talks straight about the real world of data. I'm Fee Crocker.
And I'm Sarah Burnett. And today we're talking about something that strikes fear into even the bravest data leaders, migration. Yep, that dreaded move to Tableau Cloud.
We have all been there. Change freezes, lost favorites, broken permissions, and a flood of IT tickets. All that chaos comes with replatforming.
But what if you didn't have to suffer through that anymore?
Guest today is someone who's flipped the migration script, Timothy Vermeiren. He is an Iron Viz Champion, certified consultant and architect, and the mastermind behind TabMove, Biztory's turbocharged Tableau Cloud migration engine.
TabMove automates up to 90% of the work permissions, user schedules, even favorites is done. It's the fastest, cleanest, most scalable way to migrate, and it's trusted by big names across Europe and the US.
And the best part? DubDub Data has partnered with Biztory to bring TabMove to Australia, New Zealand, or Singapore. We've got you covered with local expertise and hands-on support.
So if you're staring down a migration and thinking, not again, this episode's your permission to breathe out.
But before we get started, smash that like, hit subscribe, and let's chat on how to migrate smarter, not harder, with Timothy from Biztory.
Timothy, before we dive into TabMove, could you give us a short snapshot of your journey, just the key steps that brought you here today?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Sarah, Fee. So yes, Timothy Vermeiren here. I've been active in professional life for about 12 years, and most of that's been filled with Tableau. I've been a BI consultant since the start, specializing quite quickly in Tableau, and I've been an analyst for a long time first. I do have a technical background, so at some point I started shifting towards Tableau Server. I think we've all heard the term accidental Tableau Server admin. I'm not one of them, but I've worked with many of them. Being a server consultant, having that technical background has then led up to me becoming more of a data dev, and it refers to people who develop integrations and automations around Tableau as a platform or with data in general. That's been the journey towards me as a Biztory consultant, developing a tool to facilitate migrations that is called TabMove.
Yeah, it's so amazing to have you here today with us. And I just want to acknowledge it's been an amazing journey for us over the past few months, getting to know you and spending more and more time with you. And you're an absolute inspiration to us and many other community members as well. And we can't wait to share with people down under and in New Zealand the amazing way to migrate your Tableau server and essentially take all of those nasty headaches away because of the amazing work you've done by shutting yourself away and taking a look behind the scenes at all those different APIs to get everything sorted.
Very excited as well because Biztory, we are active mainly in Europe and we have clients in the US that we help migrate, but it's such an exciting time to finally be able to broaden that horizon. So I'm thankful that we found you, that we found each other, and that we're going to be doing this together.
So let's kick this off. The case for migration. Why do you think so many organizations are making the switch to Tableau Cloud now?
That's a good question to start with, right? Before you migrate, you have to be convinced that Tableau Cloud is the platform for you. I think historically, Tableau Cloud has not been around as long as servers. So there's a relatively large portion of Tableau clients that will have started on server and haven't had the opportunity to choose between the two originally. So if you will, we're kind of dealing with a backlog of Tableau customers that is continually considering and then moving to Tableau Cloud. But what are these factors that drive them, right? On one hand, the biggest pet peeve of having server is you also have to provision the infrastructure. You're responsible for hosting Tableau Server. You're responsible for maybe bare metal or virtual infrastructure that involves additional IT teams. And it goes without saying an additional cost as well, because you own and operate that infrastructure and the teams that maintain them. And then you get to look at the rest of the advantages of cloud, pull you over the line. Many features that Tableau is releasing do come to Tableau Cloud first. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. And the prime example is Pulse. That's the biggest feature that has been released in my eyes in the past 3 or 4 years. And it was very Tableau Cloud only initially. And there was a lot of apprehension of that, like, oh, Pulse looks very good. We want to use that too. And so many server clients were felt a bit abandoned. And again, that got me thinking there have to be technical reasons. And there were. These weren't officially revealed, I think, but conversations with Tableau and they've presented at conferences have indeed suggested that running Pulse on server is a very, very difficult thing to do because it's not just another server process. It's a whole other thing on its own that connects to so many other things and that relies on resources that you might not have locally. But think of how AI operates nowadays and how you can run a local large language model, but you have to set all of that up. I'm thinking there was something similar with Pulse, unrelated to AI, but the fact that it needed resources that online and on the internet and by hosting this as a service were trivial to do and for Tableau to maintain and implement, but were very difficult to port and delegate to a server environment. Another example is the VizQL data service. Allows you to directly query published data sources on your Tableau environment. And again, has been available for cloud for close to a year and just got to server last version, also because of implications of how that has to work with other processes and their dependencies. To summarize what I've been saying until now, we have infrastructure and total cost of ownership. Then the nice things to have are the features that you get with cloud. What you also receive is the guarantee that cloud is a platform with the highest possible level of security and compliance. I'm familiar with the fact that in the US, in Europe, in other regions, there are requirements for different industries. And almost never there has been an issue in that part of the conversation. When I inquire about that with someone I start working with a new customer, they will be like, yes, but they have this certification. And then a final item that may not be so obvious. Once you are able to leave the management of your infrastructure of Tableau Server behind you, you will benefit from all of the automatic scaling and other aspects that normally you would have had to manage very closely, but that just come with Tableau Cloud. So do you want to run more background extract refreshes at some point? You don't really have to review your backgrounders, see if there's enough capacity, etc. That is just going to work. Do you want to release a viz that you know is going to have a high peak in visitors at some point in time because maybe there's a press release or something? They'll work. The demand will be handled for you because Tableau Cloud is elastic and scales to do that. It's not unlimited. There are resources assigned to each tenant, but these are designed to facilitate any kind of scenario like this without requiring you to review all kinds of specificities or worry about that. So quite a few advantages, if you ask me.
Yeah, some really great features there, Timothy. And I think one of the ones that coming from a large corporate background in the big banking environments would be that I would no longer be 18 months behind the curveball with versioning. So that's something that would be very exciting.
That makes me really excited to hear about. And you're lucky as a bank that you were only 18 months behind. When I was at my bank, it was many, many years behind. So I think that's definitely one of the things. To be much closer to the latest releases definitely helps. Some of the other things that cross my mind, also having that large corporate background experience, I find that corporates don't turn on the licensing server or understanding how, what licensing is actually being used. And so once you get onto cloud, that's natively integrated and you can manage your licenses much more effectively. And that way you're not over purchasing. You can potentially be spending that money in different areas that's going to help to drive the adoption as well. So you can do a lot of things that actually make it much, much more cost effective.
So Timothy, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest blockers organizations face when they're trying to migrate manually?
Yes. So we've heard stories about that. When companies feel like they're ready for cloud, they encounter another challenge, which is now get from server to cloud. And if I may point out, without any judgment, just in a neutral way, almost everyone we talked to asked us, well, how come this is so difficult? It's Tableau to Tableau, right? How can it be a thing that we have to think about how we're going to migrate? How can we not just give Tableau our Tableau server and make that Tableau Cloud? Which, well, it makes me laugh a little bit because obviously that's a perception I understand. It's A to A, it's Tableau to Tableau. So indeed, why? Of course, there's so many reasons why. The main one being, well, you're going from your own Tableau server environment to a multi-tenant environment that is managed differently. It's essentially the same software running. It's Tableau server on mega steroids, I suppose. And there's many things that none of us know about how all the inner workings of cloud go. The question is valid, but the answer doesn't change. We cannot take a backup and restore it because, well, you'd restore over other people's sites. We cannot export a site because that doesn't contain all of the information. It's just the content. And then still running that process on cloud would be a weird thing to do. So here we are. We do need to consider our options for migrating. And then indeed, the clients immediately consider option number one, which is let's migrate manually, because that's the most obvious way. We just take our content and we put it back there. And maybe we involve our creators and content owners and we delegate so that they put their content there. And that's it. That should be it. And we're done. It's just pushing the content to cloud. That's the initial idea. And then maybe they start considering the other aspects. Maybe they even start to then see, well, actually, it's a bit more involved than just moving the content. There's a few other things going on that need to be accounted for. And that's another hurdle that they would encounter, because I believe it is possible to do this, to delegate to all of your creators to re-upload their content that is still current, if that's a reasonable amount. But, well, as a person, you have to be able to manage your content on server as well. So ideally, you haven't proliferated 1,500 workbooks of your own on there, but that's up to you. But then still, many other implications, like not every workbook that works on server will work on cloud for a variety of reasons. One obvious one is the connectivity to the data used by the workbook, or the data source by extension, which could be on-premise. And then that connectivity needs to be accounted for. Like, you do not allow any connection from the internet, from cloud services, from Tableau Cloud to your on-premise database. So what do you do with that? Enter Tableau Bridge, which is a new component in the equation. It's not a overly complex one, but it is one that you need to give a lot of thought and you need to architect in your new Tableau Cloud deployment. And Tableau Bridge, just for the background, is what's going to facilitate the connection from Tableau Cloud to Tableau on-premise databases. So it'll sit in your network and it'll broker the connections from cloud to your databases. And because it's internal to your network, it's a secure way to do so because it's managed there and you have full control over which connections are allowed to come in, which are obviously only the ones from cloud, they're authenticated, etc. But that's not something that is automatically in place when you manually start migrating your stuff. So that's something you would encounter. And so aside from connectivity, I mentioned a workbook might not automatically work on Tableau Cloud. There is the potential that you're using older versions of Tableau and the workbook itself, but even the extract inside, that can have an impact on whether the workbook does or does not work with Tableau Cloud. It's one of the most common things, by the way, that we surface with TabMove as we automatically migrate the content and we get output about the success for publishing workbooks. The most common error is an outdated extract in the TDE format, which is a legacy format and hasn't been supported since early 24. And so everyone's always surprised, like, oh no, we have so many old extracts. Oh, we thought that this content was still being used. Turns out it's not the case. It's an easy way to surface that, like just throw it to cloud. And if it comes back saying it doesn't work, then you have your legacy extract right there. And then almost always it's like, oh no, of course, you're right. No one did look at this because the data is stale. The data is 2.5 years old. We never intended to move this. Fine. But again, things that if you migrate manually, you will run into, have to investigate, and then have to identify further. Whereas all those things, they come up, they are unexpected, they are intricacies, they are technical specificities that may not have been accounted for. So just migrating manually is not as easy as it might sound at first.
Yes, it certainly sounds like there's some tricky gotchas that are involved in that migration and trying to go about it yourself. Can you talk us through the hidden costs of sticking with legacy on-prem Tableau server setups?
Yes. So while we were going through the reasons to move to cloud, we already mentioned cost savings that referred to infrastructure as well as the teams managing that infrastructure. So, whereas that's one thing, maybe it's good to point out that there are hidden savings on the other side of the coin, if you will. If you do free up all of that, your infrastructure teams that are probably looking over internal resources can focus on things that have to be on site and remain there. Like maybe you're not going to move your database to cloud, so that's something that can still be looked at by those teams. But you do also have your actual Tableau server administrators, at least in large enough organizations. And I believe, and I've seen that they can then free up their time and do, in my opinion, more useful things with it. Not that managing Tableau Server is not useful. I've done it for 5 years and I've enjoyed all of it because it's a challenging thing and motivating thing to do, like figure out this TSM command and why that doesn't work. Fantastic. But if you can instead pivot and not worry about that core layer and then TSM, etc., all working, then you can get closer to the users and see how they are using Tableau Server. You can start working on things that I find even more amusing, like building reporting for them, which you can still do on Tableau Cloud, like build a much better utilization report for all of your workbooks and dashboard, build a much better permission report so you can audit those permissions, things like that. So there's enough to do still. Like, you know how as a Tableau Server admin, you have an endless to-do list and half of that was infrastructure? Well, drop that and you can start working on the fun half that wasn't prioritized before.
Upgrading those Tableau administrators into doing more fun stuff. I like that. Now, Timothy, TabMove automates 90% of the migration. What are some of the tasks it handles that teams usually really hate?
Yes, it automates 90% of the migration, and the bulk of that is uploading the content to Tableau Cloud. So at its core, it automates actions that would otherwise be manual and have to be executed by people, and does all of that. It's not just the upload, by the way. So just to give you some insight into how it functions, Tableau Server and Tableau Cloud will both be in place by the time we use TabMove, and it's going to connect to both and start by downloading the content and the metadata from Tableau Server, and then upload and recreate all of that on Tableau Cloud to ideally end up with two identical environments. And again, the bulk of that is really workbooks, data sources, and flows. It's the tangible assets that need to be downloaded and republished or uploaded. And that's a big chunk of the work. It means that all of your creators and content owners don't have to spend a full week reorganizing their content and re-uploading that. I'm saying a full week as an example for an average migration size. But that's just one thing. What it will also take care of is some basic testing as it uploads that content. For example, it uploads a published data source that connects to Snowflake. It can do that with the credentials that go with it that were embedded on server, and it will test the connectivity from Tableau Cloud, which is important because at some point you may have whitelisted some connection into your Snowflake environment, or you may have set up some more restrictive rules. And you would then find out, okay, we still need to do that for Tableau Cloud. So that's one example of a thing that come up in the initial testing uploads that we do. Other basic testing that it does is when it uploads a workbook, it's going to look for the most popular view based on server statistics in that workbook. And it's going to download the image for that dashboard, which is a very simple thing to do, but it has an important, if the dashboard comes out blank, we can detect that. Then there is a problem. Then maybe it's the connectivity through the data source of the workbook, or it's another problem with compatibility. Inherent to TabMove is these basic tests. So that's another thing that's automated that otherwise you would be finding yourself combing through workbooks and opening every dashboard. And we can get into more intricate things as well. You normally wouldn't think of as you start migrating manually. A prime example is you may have URLs in use in your dashboard, URL actions, URLs that point to documentation in a text field, which is all very good practices. But if they point to Tableau Server, they will all be outdated because you will probably have a different URL that, is a Tableau Cloud one than you did have with Server. So what do you do with that? Well, if you were migrating manually, you would open a workbook in desktop, look for all those references, and then change those. Or if you're a very technical person, you would say, I'm going to download all my workbooks, unzip all of them, and write a script that goes through them and changes them. So you could do that for yourself, but we've already built that. So as a workbook is downloaded and then re-uploaded, TabMove will scan it for references to the old server, even site that it's on, and then change all of those so that URL actions between workbooks, for example, would continue working. Not something you would think of, I believe. In fact, not something I thought of, because it was only at the third migration we did that someone was like, wait a minute, my URL actions are broken. I thought, okay, we did not account for that. And actually, to be very transparent, in the first, 20 migrations, TabMove grew very organically like this. Only when someone complained about something, we would realize, right, we could account for that as well. And then features like that were being built. Another thing that can be automated and that came from a request at some point is the ability to merge server sites into fewer sites on Tableau Cloud. So the background here is, on server, you may be used to having unlimited sites, as you do, because you can create as many as you want, and you can use that for any logical grouping or siloing that you want. But on Tableau Cloud, you're typically not going to have 70 sites like you had for your 70 teams on Tableau Server. So a question that has started coming up at some point during the migrations we delivered was, well, we have too many sites, so what do we do? We were already convinced, we already bought the licenses, but now we have to make it work. Another feature request, the ability to translate sites into top-level projects. We do that by taking the site, their users, the groups that are on there, and evaluating what that would be if they were a project and how the permissions would reflect the exact same access for the users that are going to share a site. At the end of the day, if you do use this functionality, that means that someone who had access to, let's say, 2 sites on Tableau Server will end up seeing 2 top-level projects on Tableau Cloud, and the permissions should be reflecting their capabilities one-to-one as they were on server, through the help of some additional groups that are created. At this point, this does sound very intricate. It is. These are things that we've put a lot of time and effort in, because those are common questions with difficult answers, but they're reproducible. So we invested the time in automating that kind of stuff as well, that I think otherwise might give the manual migrators a bit of a headache.
And I don't know about you, Fee, but when Timothy mentioned groups and permissions, I was thinking back to my corporate life and just going, oh my gosh, the thought of having to migrate people's permissioning really sends shivers down my spine. Is that something that TabMove can automate?
It can, and I'll admit, it was not the most fun part to develop, because it can be incredibly complicated. You have your locked to projects permissions, but then you have the customizable ones. Then you have your groups and your users, and then you have all the capabilities. I think every person who has used Tableau can picture the little screen when you show the permissions and how many values there can be and how they can differ. Turns out the Tableau REST API is actually quite good at doing that. So I did mention it wasn't the most fun part, but it's doable. Someone could automate this on their own in a few days if they have some development experience, but there were exceptions to be accounted for, like, wait, how did you apply permissions there? That's a really weird way to do it, and I don't think we've accounted for that. It's very difficult, but it's totally doable and automatable. So yes, we did. We had to, obviously, because if we moved all the content, but then said, hey, bye, have fun doing your permissions, then I don't think we would not have proven them a service.
There's so much to unpack in everything that you're saying. So first up, it's amazing that you've had an opportunity to prove this out so many times with so many different clients and continue to develop and build on, what the art of the possible is within the process. So, I see it as you're almost, like a dog with a bone. There's another bone that I need, like here's another problem that I need fixing or migrating in there. How many clients is it that you've actually migrated so far?
55 since last week. We have a dashboard that's automatically posted to our Slack and tells us, oh, this is the counter now.
So totally data driven. And look, you're right. Like there are other ways that people could look at automating some of these processes with the REST API, the migration SDK perhaps, but they will still have to do everything from scratch. And they would have to make all those same discoveries that you've made by proving it out over so many clients as well. When you automate up to 90% of the migration, what's the 10% that you don't automate?
There are things that are even more difficult to migrate to than permissions. Some things are new and may or may not be facilitated by the REST API yet. I'm thinking about virtual connections is a relatively new feature that we had not developed until a certain point in time, because it was such a new feature that it was unlikely that a server client would be using them very extensively and would require us to move them as well. So we'd often be like, the trade-off is we need to spend a few weeks developing that, whereas we know the audience for this is going to be relatively limited. So we make decisions about migrating things or not migrating things in that way. Virtual connections we have implemented by now, but it's actually not possible to fully migrate them. So it's an example of the second case as well. There's a very, very specific use of virtual connections, depending on whether you're using extracts or not, and row-level policies or not, and another thing or not, then funny thing is, you would only be able to republish that virtual connection to cloud as a draft. We estimate 90%, just to say, well, there is going to be some stuff. Comments as well, by the way, not that, many people care about migrating those, but we can objectively not migrate them. So, yeah.
I love you're so transparent about the things that really aren't included. I believe there are also other things in a migration that you could never automate, like understanding what is going to be migrated or doing that project planning along the way. Every project that comes along is going to have an aspect of things that aren't actually automated.
That's actually true. Yeah. And I haven't talked about the project aspect of the migration. TabMove refers to the tool as well as the framework in the project deliveries. And the actual running of TabMove, the downloading and the uploading, is but a fraction of the work that we do with the client. We do have to spend a lot of time understanding the environment and helping them understand what will be their environment on cloud and whether changes could be made to improve. We work with clients that have used Tableau for over a decade, and they are very well aware that, well, we have a lot of legacy stuff on here, and the project structure and even governance that we started with originally is not what we would want to use today if we knew everything we knew now. It's a time to pause and to reflect and to say, well, effectively, yes, we're going to change the project structure. We're going to change governance. We're not going to let people do this, but we are going to let them self-serve that aspect. And you're right in saying that all of that obviously cannot be automated. It's all work that will have to be done, but that we're more than happy to facilitate altogether.
And you spoke there about how long they've been with Tableau. Looking back through my career, there's some that I would definitely not want to just lift and shift, although you can do that with 90%. We'd really want to go through a proper change management governance process to figure out what we can get rid of in terms of legacy and tidy up along the way. Now, additional to TabMove, there's also Tableau's CMT, so the content migration tool. How does that compare to TabMove?
Excellent and very common question, as you would expect, because, well, if we take a step back, we just mentioned people are going to start looking into their options for migrating. Option 1, manual. Option 2, I'm going to Google and I'm going to see, oh, Tableau has a tool for this. It's called the content migration tool. And it's definitely a valid candidate. But there are two caveats with using the CMT, which are A, it's not been designed for migrations per se. It's been designed for copying or moving content, but in a process related to how you develop your dashboard, maybe with your test and production environments and things like that. So those things it does very well, but that's just a transfer between environments, not a migration from server to cloud. And then B, because it's designed to do that, whereas we're able to boast these 90% automated, it has not actually been designed to move all the other stuff. Like, it wouldn't do your users in groups. It wouldn't do your data alerts on top of your workbooks. So because it's so content oriented, it will do that extremely well. But if you choose that option, you need to account for all the stuff around it. And there may be more than you think, like users, groups, schedules, projects. That's all the stuff you need to put in place before you get to the content. We have this hierarchy we use with TabMove. Like, there is one right order to migrate, and that involves doing those first because they are dependencies of the workbooks and data sources. You need to have those in place. You need your project to put a workbook in it. But then there's all the rest coming after that. Extract refreshes, subscriptions, data alerts, collections, favorites, custom views. I'm probably missing a few because there's too many, but all of those things are also at your responsibility if you use the CMT, because again, it's content oriented and it's stuff that we've put the time into to automate.
And that's a lot of fiddly stuff.
It is, most definitely. We mentioned a few favorites. They're actually doable because there are REST API endpoints for them, but there's some challenges to these as well. Like, you cannot get all the favorites on a Tableau site. In fact, you have to get the favorites per user. So if you have 50,000 users, that's going to be 50,000 API calls you need to do. Not enormously difficult to automate, but also something you need to account for in how you're going to migrate that stuff because 50,000 API calls of 1 second still take a lot of time. So there's all these intricacies. We've developed very recently the ability to do that in parallel with TabMove, for example. So you could do that 8 at a time and then move a bit faster. It might seem simple, like I just need to move my data alerts, but it's actually much more complicated. If you don't mind me elaborating on one more thing there, because I'm going to admit I'm pretty proud of that. We made the choice to also use unsupported APIs of Tableau to facilitate the migration of as much as possible. And these data alerts are specifically one example of that. There were no supported REST API endpoints for data alerts. I don't know if there are any today. I don't think you can do a full migration of a data alert. You can get some information, but you cannot recreate it on the other side. So what we decided to do is, let's investigate why Tableau, when you click things in your browser, can create that data alert, because obviously there is a way to do this. Your browser is communicating with Tableau Server or with Tableau Cloud, and it's exchanging information that results in that data alert being created. So it has to be possible. We have to be able to recreate those steps and automate them. And that's when you land on the Viz Portal API. I think many people who have worked with Tableau for a while may be familiar with it. The Viz Portal API is sometimes referred to as the undocumented API or the native API because it's what your browser uses to communicate with Tableau Server. It's different from the REST API, which is publicly documented and intended to build integrations and automations and is very well prepared for that. It has been designed to be resilient and to accept any kind of input, but it has limited capabilities. So back to the Viz Portal API, it's for internal use only. And I think that's enough warning, right? It's like, we're not going to help you with it. It's not documented. It can break, etc. But so again, we made that choice to inspect that and see, okay, we can actually authenticate as the user in a Viz Portal session, not just REST API, through some magic that we had to figure out. But that opens up a whole world of possibilities, because then all we had to do was listen in on the browser's conversation with Tableau Server, look at which endpoints it would address, how it would talk, and then we would just take that information and recreate that. It's a big risk as well, because again, internal, undocumented, and prone to breaking. So we're making the choice here too to say, well, if Tableau changes something, it's on us to fix that as soon as possible to continue supporting that. Because if in Tableau Cloud 2026.1, they change how data alerts are created through the Viz Portal API, we're going to have to adjust our code to do that as well. But that was a trade-off we very actively chose to make so that we can cover those 90, or let's maybe say 99% of things that can be migrated. That was a very conscious decision to do that.
2 months ago, we had Matthew Miller from Tableau on the podcast. So he's recently been promoted to VP of Product Management, and he was gushing about how amazing of a job that you've done in terms of going into those undocumented APIs to make the magic happen and to really make this migration so seamless for people and removing so much risk for them as well.
I would be remiss if I didn't admit that one of the drivers behind this was effectively that same person. He was at Biztory for a while, and he then moved to Salesforce, Tableau, and he definitely planted seeds like, yeah, you're going to want to do this and this maybe in case you want to support that full array of capabilities. And it's like, damn, he's right. I wish I hadn't heard this. I wish we could just say it's not possible. But unfortunately, well, no, of course, fortunately, he drove us to do that extra mile. And then now, well, TabMove having the capabilities it has today.
Yeah, so I think there must be so many amazing customer stories out there. And we did a little bit of research and we hunted down the Veygo case study. So can you tell us, how did a 6-week migration get cut down to just a few days?
Yes. So Veygo is a UK client that we worked with, and the 6 weeks you're referring to were the estimates that I believe Salesforce or Tableau Professional Services would come up with, because they do help you migrate as well, but they use the manpower that they have to facilitate that, and then it's 6 weeks. So we use that as a baseline sometimes when we come in to compare. And well, it's a bit of an unfair comparison because it's apples and oranges, but well, still we cut it down to a few days. That's the essence of the story. So how did that happen? Well, there is obviously all of the automation. So being able to get the content and upload it automatically frees up all of our time to then also guide that customer from server to cloud, because there's all this overhead as well, right? You're introducing these people to a new platform. And if you were doing all of that manually, then the focus would be on the manual work for that period of time. And only then afterwards would you be able to say like, look, here's your content. Does it look right? Oh, wait, no, we have to go back and do something else. We automate, but we don't migrate everything in one go. We usually do that incrementally and then have people review content as we do that. So for Veygo, that would have been day one. We upload a small amount of content, but representative content, so that they can start checking that. It's their most viewed dashboards. It's dashboards and workbooks that connect to specific data sources that have to be checked. And so that's our starting point. In the next day, we'll just move a bit more of that same stuff. And then maybe in day 3 and 4, we'll look at migrating the bulk, the rest that remains there. And that automated approach that's incremental facilitates that to happen much faster, to also, you would say, fail faster, because we would find out about things not working initially, be able to fix that so that the next days can still continue, as opposed to doing that in a very monotonous, serial way of uploading workbook after workbook manually. So the automation and then the incremental aspect, they're able to bring down migration time quite significantly.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it sounds like this process could really make a Tableau administrator or platform owner just look like an absolute rock star, because they're making sure that this transformation from on-prem into the cloud is as seamless and easy for everyone, including themselves as well, and no doubt saving on costs.
Yep, agreed. We've had a few of those Tableau administrators we worked with be very thankful, obviously, at the end of the migration. Like, they are always the point of contact of their whole audience, of all of their creators. And they are the ones being looked at when the word migration is being dropped, right? So that's a bit daunting. And imagine, yes, that plan starts getting in motion, and the admins are going to be responsible for making sure the content gets there. We become part of their team. We do all of that together with them. It is noticeable, like when you see people just sign into cloud and they're like, oh yeah, effectively, my content is all here. How did you do that? Because creators are well aware of the difficulties very often, like of what it would take to move all that stuff. Then the admins are like, yeah, we did this together with them and we had a good time doing it. Ideally, I suppose usually it is the case. There are challenges, obviously, technicalities to overcome, but at the end of the day, yeah, they're usually quite pleased with the teamwork we can put up to do this.
Not only the reduction in potential cost and time spent with admin, but also that change freeze time as well, where new Tableau development wouldn't be able to happen if you're talking about a 6+ week migration, right? You're going to have a freeze where you're not going to be able to serve your business users as quickly as you would like to. So many additional benefits in doing a fast migration.
You're right. I had not mentioned it yet, but it is often a thing that comes up. And a freeze in IT terms, in case anyone's not familiar with it, but you described it is, don't change anything. Like, we're going to be moving your content from that date to that date, but anything you do will be lost. So just don't touch it. And it's correct that this is very often a bit of a negotiation and a big item on the agenda as well. Like, this has to be reduced as much as possible. 6 weeks, unacceptable. Other customers we talked to were considering 3 months, like because of how they had the impression that a manual migration would take that amount of time. Correct impression, obviously, if it is manual. But then being able to reduce that is a very tangible way to reduce friction with the business, obviously, because the business is impacted. They do not stand still for 3 months or 6 weeks. They do have to adapt their business logic in their dashboards. They do have to produce new content to answer new questions. And reducing that may at first seem just like, a different timeline for the project, but has a very real impact on how people use Tableau.
Really interesting. Now let's discuss outcomes. How do customers describe the impact once Tableau Move is all done and dusted?
So for those Tableau admins, a relief mostly. And I would be lying if I didn't admit, for us as well, because migrations, even when we automate them, and even when you've done 55 of them, they're still a bit scary. Like, you can use Tableau with so many different types of data sources in so many different types of ways. You can build so many different types of analyses, dashboards, things, and then you can use that in so many different places, embed it wherever you want, that no migration is ever the same as another one we've done before. And there's always something new. And very often it's like, how is this going to turn out? Why are they using that authentication type with that data source that has to use Bridge? How is that going to work out? It's always still a bit scary. So everyone's very relieved at some point in time. And I'm really being quite honest here, because even when we start the work, there's still a bit of tension. Like, oh, these guys are promising a lot. Are they going to be able to deliver that? And this is something that kind of drives me as well. Like, it would be too simple if we figured it all out and we would just click start and it would just do it, and that's every migration ever. Now, it's a lot of fun that there are still challenges coming up that we need to address, and sometimes need to patch as well. But that's what we do. So that's why relief is prevalent throughout the teams there. Then when it's done, they get the opportunity to start looking at all of the new and shiny things that they have on Tableau Cloud. So that's often something we notice as well. When the migration's finished, it's only a matter of like hours or days even before questions start coming in, like, oh, now we have access to this feature, and can you explain us Pulse? So things come in really quickly. Obviously, we're a bit more mature, and now we try to plan for that. So we will have informed people about what's to come, especially in enterprise environments. This is an absolute requirement. Like, they need to know, like, pixel per pixel, what the new environment is going to be like, because otherwise it's going to throw people off. So there's a lot of preparation going on there. But finally getting access to those things, it's an entertaining moment as well. Like, seeing people discover new possibilities, start thinking about how they'll use them. That's quite an aha moment as well.
I think on any project, though, that a good consultant goes into, there's always relief when it's actually delivered and signed off and everyone's happy, because that's the goal that we all want. Is we want to go in, we want to solve some problems, we want to do it in an elegant way, and we really want to knock the socks off and make someone super happy about what they've had delivered. So I love the honesty in that, and I think that anyone would feel the same. I've heard that you have a 3-step delivery model. So what happens after someone raises their hand and says, we want to migrate?
It starts with the scoping, because it is a project and we need to scope what we're going to be, delivering and how much we're going to be migrating. Because we see environments that are 150 workbooks for 20 total users and 5 gigabytes in total, but we see environments that are 4 terabytes and 10,000 workbooks for 120,000 users. And so we need to know what we're going to be dealing with before we can do anything else. So the key starting point is that scoping that's facilitated through a workbook we provide the customer. It plugs into their Tableau server and it surfaces information from the Tableau repository, the database, and it tells us about the volumes and the counts of everything we're going to be migrating. Again, the numbers I mentioned, like 500 workbooks, 20,000 users, 500 gigabytes, all of that is being surfaced. And that's the material we need for our scoping. But it's not everything, because volume is one thing, and that's going to be a very important factor to decide how big of a project this is. But there's a lot of things to be said about complexity as well. If a customer has 15,000 workbooks, but they all connect to Snowflake, which is a cloud-based database, and you just, can connect directly from Tableau Cloud, that's very simple. We're just going to be downloading and uploading stuff, and it's just going to work. But if they have 500 workbooks and they connect to 30 different types of data sources, of which 25 are on-premise, and then there's files on network shares, well, it's going to work, but it's going to require a bit more effort from our end and them together to figure out, okay, can we set a bridge so that we can talk to those files on that network share? And which type of bridge does it have to be? Are we going to host it on Windows or Linux? Suddenly, a whole additional component gets added to the project, which we surface during that scoping. We use that workbook, but obviously it's also a conversation, right? So the workbook surfaces summary and basic information like, oh, we see you're using SQL Server here. Can you tell us a bit more about that? And we have that conversation to discover, for example, are you using native authentication for SQL Server or Windows authentication? Because that's going to be a difference as well. And that's not going to change the size of the project at the end of the day. That's pretty detailed already, but we're starting to gather information that's going to impact our delivery already anyway. So yes, step one, scoping call. We have a ton of information. We negotiate with the client, and at some point we might get to an agreement. But even before that, we will also commit to going to step two if more convincing is required. And I'm saying that, again, I'm going to be maybe a bit too honest here, but maybe we need to be convinced as well. Like, it's not just the client needing to be convinced about that move, but we might also want to get a bit closer to the whole thing and to then be able to say, okay, yes, this is as expected. This is, there are no surprises here. And what I'm referring to is step two is an actual workshop where we come in for a day or two, or if it's a bigger environment, maybe 3 or 4. And we put TabMove in place and we do a micro migration, if you will. We connect everything, we set everything up, we configure everything, and we just showcase that some of that works. Some of that, because we cannot cover everything if it's a huge environment in a matter of 3 days, but we can prove, for example, that we can take that SQL Server Windows authentication workbook and move that and have it work on Tableau Cloud. And being able to prove that that specific technical thing that may have been scaring everyone and then, may have been creating a lot of uncertainty, proving that that works goes a long way in both directions. Like, we'll feel confident about the offer we're putting on the table, and they'll feel confident that we're able to deliver. So I've often had a lot of fun in those shorter workshops as well. Same reason as before, like, there's a bit of tension, like, these guys, they come in here and they're saying that they're going to be able to do this. Well, hopefully then we can prove that that's true. But it's a very fun challenge for a few days. Like, it's very motivating and driving. So that's step two. And then assuming that goes well, which is usually the case, we've never had clients do the workshop and then step back out and say, nah, this is not going to work. But that then leads up to step three, which is the delivery. And that is, I've used the term a few times, but the bulk of the work. It's where we're going to effectively handle all of the content And we may do that in a single migration if the amount of content is reasonable. But depending on that volume, but also depending on the client's desires, like practical aspects or timelines or whatever, we can choose to chop that up in different batches as well. If it's a very large amount of content, we know that the single action of uploading that content is going to take 2 days. That's totally possible because it's a lot of gigabytes that we're pushing to Tableau Cloud. Well, then, if 2 days is too much and they want a more controllable and a segmentable approach, we will say we can do 4 uploads of half a day or something like that. And then we can always pause and review and process the feedback we get and then start the next batch once we've completed that. We're quite flexible there. We've done migrations where we did migrate a huge amount in one upload. So that's phase 3. But it could be preceded by the quiz, which
Yes.
I haven't often considered part of the project. It's more of the lead generator, but
Yes.
of course it can be crucial in already evaluating. Yeah.
Really well thought out the process there, Timothy. I really like how you start out with the 1 hour scoping session and then move through to the 1 day workshop prior to the delivery, which, like you said, is the bulk of the work. Do you offer ongoing support?
We do, yeah. It goes without saying that if you've migrated a large amount of content for a large amount of users, they'll start exploring that immediately, but they might still encounter things a week or a few weeks after the migration's been done. Again, part of the process is we don't expect everyone to check everything. People want guarantees, they need to be built in, and we do offer support, which is often up for conversation as well. Like we will say it was a large migration, so usually within the next 30 days, you should be able to have uncovered everything that might still require some attention. And those are actually minor details very often, like it's someone trying something new and then the results aren't as expected. It's an old workbook that isn't viewed very often, then just comes up and like, oh yeah, the owner didn't actually check it because it was not that important. But there does need to be some ongoing guidance at the end of the process. It's not like we close the door and say, bye, thank you. That would be impolite, I think.
Timothy, if you had 30 seconds to convince a hesitant CTO, what's your pitch for TabMove?
Okay, so dear CTO, you have concluded that Tableau Cloud is the right platform for you. So I think the challenge you're facing is moving from Tableau Server to Tableau Cloud. And as a CTO, everyone's going to be looking to you and is going to judge you based on the success of that migration. So do you want to do that as a one-off and try and figure it out yourself? Or would you like us to come and help you with TabMove? We've done only 55 of them, but they've always been fully automated. They've been successful, and we give you the guarantee with a fixed pricing that, we will deliver. So we're going to come up with an agreement, and our take is that we're only going to stop when we've fully migrated all the content that you need. And so maybe that can help you convince everyone that, you were the one driving that successful migration.
That's pretty amazing. And not many organizations will offer a fixed price on their delivery of things, in particular when something might be super large or complex. As you say, there's lots of different forks in the road, as you've experienced with all of the different migrations. And so having a CTO be able to say, this is how much it's going to cost us to get from the server into the cloud is an absolutely amazing opportunity. And I've seen the prices and they are really sharp as well. I couldn't quite believe that that's what they were being offered for.
I suppose we just, we know we can deliver and we can deliver relatively fast. Very often we're able to deliver without many problems and within that time frame. So we stand behind our offering there.
And constantly refining the tool as well to improve.
We are, yeah. I personally find that one of the more fun aspects. So I've delivered out of those 55 a number of migrations. A number has been done by the rest of the team. I'm very involved in the development, and I'm secretly a bit happy when they come up and say, hey, this isn't working yet. I'm like, ooh, yeah, some new puzzle to figure out. And they still come up. They're smaller and smaller details, or they're big new features. But yeah, there's always something we can do to improve too.
Well, At DubDub Data, we're really excited to be able to bring TabMove to the region. We actually have a short quiz that Tableau administrators or platform owners can take and scope out their size and give a bit of an estimation of how much effort it may take. So if you're excited to learn what the price might be for you to go from server to cloud, hit up the show notes and take the quiz, and then we can look at booking in a 1-hour scoping session to look at your particular environment as well. Massive thanks to Timothy for joining us and for showing us that Tableau migrations don't have to be slow, expensive, or risky.
So if you're still stuck in server purgatory, this is your sign. Hit TabMove, book the free discovery call, and start building in the cloud tomorrow, not next quarter.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and share this episode with your favorite data nerd or overworked admin. You'll be their hero. And thank you so much, Timothy, for joining us today. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure for me as well.
So until next time, stay curious, stay cloud ready, and stay undubbed.
Bye.